Bobby Shmurda looked like rap's next superstar with one viral hit. He went from Brooklyn to the top of the charts before everything came crashing down and landed him behind bars for 6 years. Everyone expected prison to be the hardest part. It wasn't in many ways. The real fight began the day he walked free. But how did it all come to this? Let's get into it. Let's start with the moment everybody remembers. In the summer of 2014, a low-budget music video out of East Flatbush, Brooklyn started showing up everywhere. A 19-year-old kid in a red polo shirt hopping around, tossing his hat in the air, doing what would become known worldwide as the Shmoney dance. The song was called Hot Inga, and it did something almost no unsigned street rap record does. It climbed all the way to number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100. That kind of number doesn't happen by accident, and it doesn't happen slowly either. This was a genuine internet explosion. Celebrities were filming themselves doing the dance. The song was on the radio in every major market. Bobby Shmurda went from a kid nobody outside of Brooklyn had heard of to a name everybody knew in a matter of weeks. Since the beginning of his career in 2013, he'd been freestyled by artists such as Juicy J, French Montana, Lil Kim, Gunplay, and T.I., and the record labels came running. Epic Records signed him almost immediately, off the strength of that one song. Here's where the title of this video actually starts to take shape, because the story of what happened to Bobby Shmurda isn't really about the song. It's about what came 6 months later. Authorities arrested Shmurda in late 2014 after he left a recording studio near Radio City Music Hall, only days after he performed Hot Boy for a national television audience on Jimmy Kimmel Live. Think about that timing for a second. He'd just done a national television performance. He was at the peak of his visibility, and within days, investigators pulled him and his crew off the street. Investigators found 2 handguns and a small amount of crack cocaine in a car in which he was riding, authorities said. But this wasn't a simple traffic stop gone wrong. An indictment charged Shmurda and more than 15 defendants with a variety of crimes, including murder, attempted murder, assault, and drug dealing. This was a coordinated law enforcement operation that had been building for a while, and Bobby Shmurda's crew, the GS9 Collective, was the target. Court papers allege that Shmurda once fired a gun toward a crowd of people outside a barbershop in Brooklyn. They also said he was present during a confrontation between rival drug gangs outside a Brooklyn courthouse where shots were fired in 2015. These were serious allegations, the kind that don't just derail a career, they can end a life or end a decade of it. And that's exactly what happened. Shmurda pleaded guilty to 1 count of third-degree conspiracy and 1 count of weapons possession. The plea deal was messy and complicated because he wasn't just thinking about himself. Shmurda was offered 5 years, while his label partner, Rowdy Rebel, was to take 12 years. Shmurda wanted to lower his friend's sentence, so he chose to take 7 years. If Rebel's sentence was lowered, and the judge agreed, he traded 2 extra years of his own life in a cell to shave time off his friend's sentence. That's the kind of decision that tells you everything about the loyalty running through this story. And it's a theme that keeps showing up as you dig deeper into what happened to him. Shmurda was sentenced to 7 years in prison in 2016, but was eligible for early release based on time he had served before pleading guilty, and for good behavior in prison. A plea deal had allowed him to avoid going to trial on multiple counts carrying penalties that could have put him behind bars for decades. So the number could have been so much worse, decades. Instead, it became 7 years, minus time served, minus good behavior credit. At his sentencing, Shmurda didn't go quietly into that plea. He said that he was forced to take this sentence. I did not want to take this sentence. I was forced by my attorney to take this plea. That's the last thing the public heard from him as a free man for a long time, a 22-year-old at the height of what should have been his prime earning years. In the music industry, walked into a cell instead of a recording studio. And here's the thing that makes this story different from a lot of rapper goes to prison stories. You've heard before, Bobby Shmurda didn't just serve a sentence. He served it the hard way, and it kept getting harder the longer it went. That's where we're headed next, because what happened inside those prison walls ended up shaping everything about what came after. So Bobby Shmurda is locked up, 7 years on the books. And if you're a fan sitting outside tracking his case, you're thinking, okay, good behavior, maybe he's out in 5 or 6. That's not how it played out. Throughout his time in jail, Shmurda has chalked up more than 10 violations for incidents, including drug possession, fighting, possessing a weapon, and more, including one instance in 2015 when he and his ex-girlfriend attempted to smuggle a knife into Rikers Island jail. That single incident became one of the more talked about moments of his incarceration. a young woman getting charged for trying to sneak a weapon in for him. It fed straight into the parole board's red on him, and it followed him for years. When his first parole hearing rolled around in September 2020, expectations were high. His mother had even expressed that she was very confident that he would be granted parole. Tentative plans were made for Shmurda to release new music upon his release. Instead, the board said no. Following his Sept 15, 2020 interview with the Board of Parole, Aquil Pollard was denied release and given a hold until the maximum expiration of his sentence. When the transcripts came out explaining why, the picture got a lot more specific. Board members cited that Bobby had multiple violations in prison, including allegedly having a shank, fighting and drug possession, but Shmurda reportedly argued that he's changed and is ready to get his life back on track. It's a pattern you see over and over in these transcripts, the institution pointing at the record and the man in front of them, insisting the record doesn't capture who he'd become. He made his case in detail. Shmurda sees his situation differently, with transcripts revealing that he made his own case to be freed. He said he doesn't have impulsive behavior anymore, considers others in his decision-making, and walks away from bad situations when they occur. He talked about wanting to get back to music, sure, but he also talked about something else. He wants to become involved in outreach programs with troubled youth, and he also said that he now sees himself as a leader rather than a follower. Additionally, he wants to get a high school GED. None of it moved the board in that first hearing. He got denied and told he'd serve out his sentence to its maximum date. That's a gut punch for anyone tracking his story, because it meant almost another full year added onto a stretch that had already swallowed his early 20s. But something shifted between that denial and the following February. Originally scheduled for release this coming December, Shmurda was let out early. The New York Times reported that he was eligible for an early release due to good behavior. A time allowance committee, not the parole board, a separate group made up of prison staff, looked at his conduct and made the call. The New York native was released 10 months earlier than his scheduled release date, after the decision to shorten his sentence was made by the Time Allowance Committee, which consists of prison staff. The morning it happened, Corrections put out a short formal statement. The conditional release from New York's Clinton Correctional Facility was confirmed via an inmate search, and a statement from the New York State Department of Corrections and Community Supervision that read, at approximately 8:30 this morning, Aquil Pollard was conditionally released from Clinton Correctional Facility. 6 years almost to the day after he'd been pulled off the street near Radio City Music Hall. And this is where the loyalty theme from earlier comes back around, because he wasn't walking out alone in spirit. His right-hand man from the GS9 days, the rapper Rowdy Rebel, had done his own long stretch on the same case and had already gotten out. The two of them had been co-defendants, had taken pleas together, and their fates had been tied since that arrest. Watching one come home reminded everybody the other one was still waiting, and vice versa. It was never just Bobby Shmurda's story. It was always the story of a crew. His release didn't happen quietly either. Migos rapper Quavo, who'd been talking about a joint project with Shmurda before the arrest, made it known publicly that he intended to be there. "I'm going to get my guy," the Migos frontman told Billboard before Shmurda's release. "I'm personally gonna go pick up Bobby Shmurda." And he made good on it, showing up with a private jet. That image, a rap superstar personally flying up to collect his friend from a state prison in the middle of nowhere in upstate New York, became one of the defining pictures of the day. Shmurda was released from upstate New York's Clinton Correctional Facility this morning, after serving the majority of a 7-year sentence on conspiracy and weapons possession convictions, and Shmurda got a lift home from Migos' Quavo in a private jet. But freedom came with strings attached, and those strings were long. He wasn't just released, he was released into a form of custody that would follow him around for years. That's the part of the story most people don't think about. When they picture a rapper getting out isn't the finish line. It's the start of a whole new phase of restrictions, and that's exactly where his story goes next. Here's something people don't fully grasp about a release like this. It's not really freedom. It's a transfer from one set of walls to a different invisible set of walls. Bobby Shmurda will remain under parole supervision until February 23, 2026, just over a month after the rapper was released from New York's Clinton Correctional Facility, and TMZ revealed the parameters of his 5-year parole. 5 years. That's not a slap on the wrist. That's half a decade of somebody else deciding what he can and can't do, where he can go, who he can be seen with, and the specific conditions attached to his release read like a list built specifically around the exact behaviors that had gotten him in trouble in the first place. According to reporting, Bobby can't drink alcohol, hang out at bars or with gangs. He also has to submit to substance abuse testing, get counseling for aggression and anger, and obtain and maintain employment. Read that list again. No alcohol, no bars, no gang associations, mandatory drug testing, court-ordered anger management, and on top of all of it, he has to hold down a job, as if being one of the most recognizable rappers in the country wasn't already a full-time occupation. This is the tightrope that defined the next several years of his life. One misstep, one positive drug test, one bar fight caught on somebody's phone, and he could have been sent straight back to finish out that sentence behind bars. That's the reality of conditional release. It's not forgiveness. It's a leash with a very short chain, and everybody who's covered his case since has understood that the parole clock was ticking in the background of every single thing he did publicly. And to his credit, he didn't hide from that pressure. He ran straight back into the industry that had made him famous in the first place. Bobby hit the ground running in regard to his music career, picking up where he left off. Hours after being released from prison, the hot-end rapper hit up a recording studio with Quavo. Same day, practically the same hour. 6 years gone, and the first thing he does with his freedom is walk into a booth. He also had a few performances in Atlanta during NBA All-Star Weekend that same month. That's a fast turnaround for a man who'd spent years in a state facility earning prison wages. He was straight back into the machine. Studio sessions, live performances, and the beginning of a genuine attempt to rebuild a music career from a standing start, with a felony record and 5 years of state supervision hanging over him. The business side moved fast too, but it moved in a direction that showed real friction. Before his arrest, he'd been tied to Epic Records, the label that scooped him up off the strength of Hot Inga. That relationship had gone sour long before he ever walked out of Clinton Correctional. The rapper expressed frustration with his record label on social media, stating that he had not been in control of his music since he was 19 years old. He didn't hold back about it either. In a since-deleted Instagram post, Shmurda wrote, "I ain't been in charge of my music since I was 19 years old, and I just turned 27, and honestly IDK when shit dropping. So don't ask me shit, go ask them MFs, since they want to control everything." That's a man venting 6+ years of frustration in one post, watching a machine control his name and his catalog while he had zero say in any of it from behind bars. Eventually, that pressure worked. He announced he'd gotten out of the deal entirely, posting to millions of followers that he'd signed his release papers and was done with the label that had signed him back before any of this happened. In 2022, Shmurda severed ties with Epic Records and became an independent artist. No more corporate middleman. Whatever came next, it was going to be his, for better or worse. And what came next was a genuine attempt at a comeback. New music, a new EP, a promised debut album, and a rapper trying to prove that 6 years in a cell hadn't erased what made him a star in the first place. That's the next chapter, and it's where things get more complicated than a simple he's back story. So he's independent. He's off Epic. He's got a 5-year parole clock running in the background. Now the question becomes, can Bobby Shmurda actually rebuild a career from scratch in an industry that had moved on without him for 6 years? The first real answer came a little over a year after his release. Bad Boy is the second EP by American rapper Bobby Shmurda. It was released on August 5, 2022 by GS9 Records and 1 RPM, and it is Shmurda's first project since his release from prison, and comes nearly 8 years after his last release, Shmurda She Wrote. 8 years is an eternity in music. Sounds change, audiences change. Entire genres rise and fall in that time. And here's Bobby Shmurda, stepping back into a completely different landscape than the one he left. The project brought back the same partnership that defined his original run. The EP contains guest appearances by Fat Tony and Rowdy Rebel. That loyalty theme, again, the same crew, the same names, still showing up for each other years down the line. He talked about the project with real clarity about what it meant for his future. This project is an independent project, so after this one, I can gauge who really is a Bobby Shmurda fan. That's a man testing the market. No label pushing streams artificially. Just him finding out who actually stuck around. He backed the EP with a real tour push too. Bobby Shmurda announced an American tour to promote the EP called the Bodman Tour, starting in Salt Lake City and running through the end of the year. He traveled to several major cities including Los Angeles, Dallas, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Detroit, Chicago, and New York, his hometown, with special guests Rowdy Rebel and Fat Tony. That's a full circle moment. The guy who used to perform Hot Boy on national television, now selling out club dates city to city with the same partner he did 7 extra years for. But the bigger prize, the one he kept teasing in interview after interview, was a full debut studio album. He'd been talking about it since almost the moment he got out. The book is called Ready to Live. Also, the debut album is called Ready to Live. We're still getting the financials ready for that. He laid out exactly what he wanted for it too. Not just a quiet drop, but a real machine behind it. Once the financials are ready for the album, it will be released, where it will have a proper marketing campaign and push behind it, so everybody can enjoy the music. That was said years ago, and here's where the comeback story gets complicated, because that album still hasn't come out. The EP was planned as a warm-up for Shmurda's debut studio album, Ready to Live, which was scheduled for release in 2023, but has not been released as of May 2026. An album that was supposed to drop years ago, still sitting unreleased. That's not the arc most fans expected when he first came home to a private jet and a hero's welcome. Instead of one big album drop, his actual output turned into something different. A steady stream of standalone singles, one after another, without ever landing on that one defining follow-up project. He remains a hyper-prolific singles artist, with recent releases including Cash Out, Superstar Status, and Double Up, tracks with side piece, collaborations across genres, remix packages. He's been working constantly, just not in the shape anybody originally expected. There have been other complications along the way too, the kind that come with being a public figure trying to hold a career together, while living under legal restrictions. In a nightclub in London, things got physical after a set. Bobby Shmurda got into it in the wee hours Sunday as fists flew at a London club. Bobby and his entourage were hanging out at the Proud Cabaret nightclub at around 4 a.m. And after he performed 2 songs, he got into a heated argument with the club promoter. These are exactly the kind of incidents that would have made his parole officer nervous, given the anger management terms baked into his release conditions. Then there was the touring side, which took its own hit more recently. What was supposed to be a proper full-scale tour ran into real trouble. His 2025-2026 touring efforts faced significant hurdles. His Still Alive tour was officially canceled, following a public dispute with his booking agency over ticket sales and promotion. A canceled tour, a public falling out with the people responsible for booking his shows. That's not the trajectory of a rapper who's cracked the code on rebuilding a career. It's the trajectory of someone still fighting for footing, years after everyone assumed the hard part was behind him. So by the time you get to the middle of this decade, the picture of Bobby Shmurda's career is a mixed one. Steady singles, occasional big festival bookings, a canceled tour, an album still sitting on a shelf somewhere. He'd shifted his energy elsewhere. He shifted his focus towards singular, high-paying club appearances and festival sets, such as his performance at Rolling Loud. That's a survival strategy. Take the paydays where you can get them, rather than betting everything on one big campaign that may or may not land. Which brings us to where things actually stand right now, in the present, with the Parole clock finally running out, and a personal moment that landed harder than any single he's dropped in years. So here's where the story lands. Right now in the present, the 5-year sentence hanging over his head from that release day finally expired. The year marks a major personal milestone for Shmurda. On February 23, 2026, he officially completed his multi-year parole supervision, granting him full freedom of movement for the first time in over a decade. Read that again. Full freedom of movement. Not since he was a teenager has this man been able to move through the world without some form of state supervision attached to his name. No more mandatory testing, no more scheduled check-ins, no more single misstep away from a cell. He marked the occasion the way he's marked most milestones for the last 5 years, with music. He celebrated this milestone with the release of the single Bag Tag M on February 19, 2026. But the moment that actually stopped people scrolling, the one that went beyond music entirely, happened a few months later. And it had nothing to do with a chart position or a booking fee. Bobby Shmurda's father was released from prison after 30 years. The rapper was just 2 months old when he was arrested, and the reunion went viral. Think about the scale of that. Bobby Shmurda was just 2 months old when his father was arrested in the early 1990s on robbery and assault charges out of Miami, and he is now 31 years old, meaning his father has been incarcerated for essentially his entire life. This isn't a footnote. This is the defining fact sitting underneath everything else in this story. Bobby Shmurda didn't just survive his own 6 years locked up. He grew up entirely without a father who was serving a sentence that outlasted his son's whole childhood, adolescence, and rise to fame. Bobby Shmurda has spent his entire adult life without his father present. That changed one Friday when the Brooklyn rapper shared video footage of himself reuniting with his father after the elder Pollard was released from prison following a sentence of more than 30 years. Two men from the same family, both shaped by the same system, one for a stretch measured in years, the other for a stretch measured in decades. It's not hard to see why that footage cut through in a way that no verse or chart placement ever could. The moment struck a nerve far beyond hip-hop circles, resonating with anyone who has felt the long shadow that incarceration casts over a family for generations. And fans immediately pointed out the striking physical resemblance between father and son. People who'd never listened to a single Bobby Shmurda song were sharing that clip, because it wasn't really about him anymore. It was about every family that's ever waited on the other side of a release date. So where does that leave the actual question? What happened to Bobby Shmurda? He's a man who went from a viral dance move to a Billboard top 10 hit, to a courtroom, to 6 years behind bars, to a private jet ride home, to 5 years of court-mandated restrictions, to an independent artist grinding out singles and club dates, while a promised album sat unfinished, and now, finally to a version of freedom he hasn't had access to since before he could legally drink. He's still making music, he's still touring when the bookings line up. He's rebuilding, slowly, on his own terms, without a label calling the shots. And for the first time since a car full of guns and a small amount of drugs changed the direction of his entire life outside a Manhattan recording studio. Nobody, no parole officer, no board, no supervision requirement, gets to tell him where he can and can't go. For now, Bobby Shmurda has something he's never had. His father on the outside, free and present, and whatever comes next for the two of them, that Friday marked a beginning that was a very long time coming. That's the story, not a comeback with a bow on it. Not a tragedy either, just a long, complicated stretch of a man's life, still being written, one release date at a time.